welcome to WION The World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates from the world's most volatile region. People across West Asia are on high alert. Extreme weather is sweeping the region. From earthquakes and floods to droughts and wildfires, West Asian nations are being battered by climate change. So as COP26 concludes in Glasgow, what is West Asia's strategy to tackle climate change? We tell you more.
It is code red for humanity. Climate change is ringing alarm bells for the entire world. But here in West Asia, freak weather is the new normal. It is the region's week of climate chaos. Earthquakes, droughts, floods and scorching temperatures. West Asia is experiencing it all. As lakes and marshes turn into deserts, droughts are West Asia's new crisis. As a region, West Asia is already water-stressed. There was never too much water to begin with, and reports suggest there won't be much left soon. But water scarcity is already fueling tensions here. In Iran's central city of Isfahan, hundreds of farmers took to the streets to decry the drying up of its river, calling out the impact of drought in the region. Khuzestan province has long been a hotbed of instability. In 1979, segments of the population led a push for autonomy. Now, with unrest once again rocking Khuzestan, the province has become another major flashpoint. A picture of West Asia's ongoing struggles with water scarcity, highlighting the increasing hazards of climate change. In Iraq, another water crisis is brewing. It has been in the making for nearly 2 decades. Iraqi wheat farmer Kamiz Ahmad Abbas lost it all when his battle with drought forced him to abandon his land. This has pushed him into unemployment.
I stopped working in agriculture because of the lack of rain. The increase in drought and the lack of support from the government, who could not even provide irrigation systems or water wells. I'm not the only one who quit the profession. Many other families did too. Many other farmers did too.
Outdated infrastructure and short-term policies has made Baghdad vulnerable. For war-scarred Iraq, the climate crisis is the next great threat. As Iraq bakes in the blistering summer heat, its farmers are battling severe water shortages. Shortages are killing their animals, fields, and way of life. The oil-rich country is one of the world's most vulnerable to climate change, struggling with a host of other environmental challenges. In Jordan too, water is running out. Water levels in the Jordan River are decreasing as demand rises in the arid region. While climate change has led to drier weather, Jordan has fared worse than its neighbors. Meanwhile, the population has doubled in the past 20 years, with waves of refugees into the nation. The share of water per person every year has plummeted to 80 cubic meters. At the turn of the century, it was around 3,400 cubic meters.
So this region is the most water-scarce region in the world, the Middle East, North Africa. With climate change, things are already getting a hell of a lot worse.
In neighboring Lebanon, wildfires are wreaking havoc. Wildfires have been ravaging Mount Lebanon and areas in the country's south for 3 days. The hashtag #SouthIsBurning is trending all over Twitter. While the fires are under control for now, those caught in the heat are exhausted and despondent. one of many crises to hit the Lebanese people. For years, West Asia has been shaped by conflicts, but this time, climate change is redefining the region. All the nations here are dependent on each other, but currently they remain distracted. Just phasing out fossil fuels will not be enough. The goals need to be bigger, the actions louder than words. The push for net zero has become a rally call. Gulf nations are pushing for a net zero future. But the shift can't be an immediate one. They need to keep the oil flowing to fund the transition.
And if we are to successfully transition to the energy system of tomorrow, we cannot simply unplug from the energy system of today. We cannot just flip a switch. Distinguished delegates, we must, of course, prioritize investments toward the most cost and carbon-efficient barrels.
The COP26 summit is over after 2 weeks of political haggling. All we have are lofty goals. But the time for climate action is now. West Asia is tackling freak weather every day. And hitting a snooze button on a climate catastrophe is getting more and more difficult with each passing day. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
West Asia is one of the worst affected regions in the world. But what countries are not talking about is military pollution. US military is one of the worst polluters in the region. If the United States was a West Asian nation, its pollution would be the 8th largest in West Asia. We tell you more.
The COP26 summit has been touted as the most coveted climate summit of our times. But since its inception, the COP has been failing to deliver. This year was no different. The goal was to reduce humanity's carbon footprint. In focus were fossil fuels, net zero goals, and climate finance. But missing from the discussion were armed forces. Western militaries are major polluters. For years, this has been a closely guarded secret. Greenhouse emissions are on the rise in West Asia, but insert the word national interest and conservation is forced to take a back seat. The prime example is the US military. It is the planet's largest institutional consumer of petroleum. Also the single largest producer of greenhouse gases. Sample this. From 2001 to 2017, the US military produced around 1.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. 400 million tons were directly accountable to the post-9/11 wars, like those in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. To put it into context, if the US military was a country in West Asia, it would be the region's 8th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. The main cause behind these emissions is the burning of jet fuel. For example, the coveted US F-35 fighter jet burns around 5,600 liters of fuel every hour. To put this into perspective, it would take 1,900 cars to guzzle a similar amount of fuel over the same period. But when it comes to killing terrorists or taking on adversaries, who cares about mileage? But fuel consumption is only a part of the tale. Its carbon footprint is even worse. Moving equipment and transporting them leaves a massive carbon footprint behind, one that is rarely accounted for in balance sheets. Add the manufacturing of weapon systems and ammunitions, and you have a problem no one is talking about. Another layer to the US military's climate impact is destabilizing actions in the region, like burn pits. The US Army usually sets fire to their garbage. It is a way to get rid of it. But this releases a myriad of toxic pollutants, making it difficult for anyone around to breathe. The pollution stemming from these often lead to health problems, which affect contractors, civilians and even locals living around these pits. In 1997, the world came together to address climate change. The leaders signed the Kyoto Protocol, mandating nations to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. But the US sought an exemption. It refused to reveal its military emissions on the grounds of protecting national security. In the Paris Agreement of 2015, things did change, but not for the better. Countries could voluntarily report on military emissions, but very few have come forward. Even at COP26 this year, the issue of military emissions remains shrouded behind the veils.
To fix carbon in the air.
For years, military pollution is the skeleton in the West's climate closet. They either talk about it or act on it. But bearing the brunt of their action is West Asia, as the region is battered by climate change. The West must know the time for climate action and accountability is now. But is anyone listening? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Don't go anywhere, we have a lot more lined up for this edition of the Asia Post. But first, as usual, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
Turkey's lira suffered one of its worst days in 3 years after the central bank slashed interest rates for the third month running. According to the UN nuclear watchdog, Iran has increased its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, defying 2015 nuclear deal commitments. This comes as nuclear talks are set to resume in Vienna on November the 29th. Turkey releases Israeli couple detained on espionage charges. Erdogan says that the continuation of dialogue between the two countries is in the common interest. King Abdullah II of Jordan says his country will remain on the side of Palestinians until they regain their full rights and establish an independent Palestinian state. The United States announced criminal charges against 2 Iranians, accusing them of launching a cyber disinformation campaign to meddle in the 2020 US presidential elections. Israel Defense Minister Benny Gantz's housekeeper has been charged with spying. Reports suggest that he contacted Iran-linked hackers and offered to infect Gantz's computer with malware.
A New York Times report has said that the US military 2019 airstrikes in Syria that killed 64 women and children, a possible war crime during the battle against the Islamic State. Now, the 2 airstrikes were near the town of Al-Baghouz. We bring you the story. America and war crimes. It is not a new story. West Asia has borne the brunt of it for years. The United States has been using its global clout to evade all responsibility for its actions. So here's what happened in Syria in 2019. Airstrikes took place in the town of Baghouz. This is a town in eastern Syria, which was then an Islamic State stronghold. The American military got a tip-off information about terrorists hiding among civilians. It was not clear who was a terrorist and who was a civilian. But the American military acted regardless. They dropped 2 consecutive bombs on a group of people, including civilians. Reports suggest that drone footage had indicated the presence of civilians. The US military knew there were civilians, but commanders overlooked their presence. A total of 80 people were killed. How many terrorists were there? 16. According to the US Central Command, 16 terrorists and 4 civilians were killed. So what about the other 60 people? They are unaccounted for. According to a New York Times report, analysts, the ones who monitor such drone strikes, acknowledged that most of them were unarmed women and children. Yet, no investigation was launched. The entire strike was covered up. The US military never ended up talking about it. The toll was downplayed, and the reports were classified. The US Central Command says the strike was legitimate. It said steps were taken to prevent civilian casualties. The CENTCOM also added that an investigation was launched after a report found there had likely been civilian casualties.
We do work very hard to avoid causing harm to civilians. Every civilian casualty is a tragedy. But I would also say that I have no doubt that we can work harder, and I'd go beyond that and say we must work harder.
This is not new for the United States. In 2003, when the war on terror officially began, U.S. airstrikes in Iraq killed at least 5,529 civilians. Since 2001, the U.S. has conducted as many as 100,000 airstrikes. At least 22,000 civilians have been killed. And that's just one estimate. Airstrikes and cover-ups are not new. West Asia has seen a lot of it. For years, the United States has labeled its war crimes as righteous strikes, blaming the killings on error and doing nothing to punish its leaders. Now is the time to hold them accountable. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One. Jordan has accused Iran's women's football team goalie of being a man. Amman has called the Asian Football Confederation to launch an investigation to determine the sex of the Iranian team goalkeeper, a move that was slammed by the Iranian coach Maryam Irandoust, calling it Jordan's inability to accept defeat. We tell you more.
Football is the center of controversy in West Asia. In a country dominated by men, women's football is surprisingly a popular sport in Iran. Now, a debate concerning the gender of an Iranian player has taken the region by storm. The player in question is Zohre Khudei. She played in the goalkeeper's position during a qualifier match with Jordan held in September. The match was a major milestone for Iran. It qualified for its first ever Women's Asia Cup. All thanks to Zohre Khudei, who was the showstopper. The 32-year-old saved 2 penalties and led Iran to victory. She now faces calls of a gender verification probe from the Jordanian Football Association. The president of the association, Prince Ali bin Al Hussein, posted the letter on Twitter. It is addressed to the Asian Football Confederation. It asked medical experts to investigate the eligibility of the player in question. Iran has now hit back at the claims. It defended Khudei, saying that the accusation was an attempt to shift blame. Khudei herself hit back, vowing to sue the Jordan FA on grounds of bullying. This is not the first time Iran has faced such charges. In 2015, 8 players in the team were accused to be men. The charge was leveled by an official who worked for the Iranian Football League. But many look at the charge as political. Jordan were clear favourites for the tournament, and the upset may have led to the claims. This is not the first time such bizarre charges have been made. And by the looks of it, it won't be the last one. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Saudi Arabia is flirting with a major taboo, alcohol. For years, alcohol has been a strict no-no in the kingdom. But Riyadh is now debating whether to legalize alcohol in the Saudi Arabian mega city of Neom, a move to attract tourists and investors. Let's take a look.
An artificial moon, beaches that would glow in the dark, robotic butlers and flying taxis. It sounds straight out of a sci-fi novel. Built deep in Saudi Arabia's deserts, this is Neom, the kingdom's new mega city. The city of Neom derives its name from the Greek word for new and the Arabic term for future. A child of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Neom has been billed as humanity's next chapter. Once completed, it will be 33 times the size of New York. Neom is a crucial part of the Crown Prince's 2030 vision, and he has left no stones unturned. The glitzy futuristic city will cost a whopping $500 billion. And to fund this mega project, Saudi has even sold 1.5% stake of its state-owned oil giant Aramco. The plan is to attract tourists and investors. Neom will operate under its own founding law. The current law is still being formulated, but the mega city is flirting with a major taboo: alcohol.
When it comes to alcohol, I can't tell you that yes or no it's going to be in the law, but I can tell you if you think about what has to be in order for Neom to be a top attractive place around the world, and if that's a top principle, then you can infer what that means as it relates to a whole bunch of things.
In other Gulf countries, foreigners have limited legal access to alcohol. But in Saudi Arabia, there is a blanket ban. No alcohol is allowed in the kingdom that hosts Islam's holiest sites. Many consider this as a deterrent to visiting the kingdom. But Saudi Arabia is slowly changing. It is a part of the Crown Prince's 2030 vision, opening up to the world through sweeping economic and social reforms. Legalizing alcohol would break a major taboo in the country known for Wahhabism, a rigid interpretation of Islam that the kingdom propagates. It has left the oil-rich kingdom steeped in conservatism. But the role of religion is facing the biggest reset here. Neom cannot confirm whether alcohol will be allowed, but they understand the need to attract tourists. Reports suggest that it is under consideration, but only in a limited form in designated areas for foreigners. If approved, it could lead to massive social backlash, but authorities are unlikely to budge. After all, in a post-oil era, economic reforms may take precedence over religion. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
West Asia is not without its share of culture, beauty and oddities. This is why in our next segment, Curiosities, we bring you some heartwarming stories from the region. That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon, and you're watching WION. World is One.